Hi, BookTube. It's an unseasonably warm day here in England, in many corners of the United Kingdom, actually. I'm making this recording in the morning, so I get it done while the temperature is relatively cooler. If there are any new viewers watching, I should just say that I don't usually participate in the monthly reading challenges that come up on BookTube. And this isn't me participating now, because I haven't even read the rules for taking part in the June on the Range challenge. What's happened this month is just a lucky juxtaposition, synchronization between what BookTube happens to be doing and what I happen to see on a bookshelf and wanted to read. And that's probably going to be the case from time to time. So this is the text that we're going to review. It is The American West by Dee Brown, first published in 1995, but the edition that I read came out in 2004. Now let's go straight on to the first question because I have a lot of material for this review, okay? Question 1 is, could I summarize this book? This book is a patchwork portrait of one region. So it's North America, west of the Missouri River, south of the 49th parallel, and we are really staying within the 19th century, roughly. It starts from about 1830 and just tips into the 20th century, but doesn't get to the First World War. It was written by a man with a lifetime devotion to the history of this region, but I didn't feel that he was too romantically attached to his subject matter, and that was important to me. So what do we know about the author? Dee Brown was born in Louisiana, but his father died when he was 5 years old. And so his mother took the family up to Arkansas, where she took a job as postmaster, and their maternal grandmother brought up the family. Now, she was instrumental in sharing with Dee stories of her own experience on the American frontier. In addition to that, Dee made friends with some Native American boys who were the sons of men working on the local oil rigs. Those friends ensured that his concept of First Nations people would not be formed solely from the cowboy films that he was seeing in the town cinema. And Dee's relationship with those boys left him with a greater empathy for the Native American experience of Western settlement. By profession, Dee was a librarian. He traveled to Washington in the 1930s, and he got a job working for the library in the U.S. Department of Agriculture. During the Second World War, Brown worked at Army Ground Force headquarters in Washington, along with another librarian named Martin Schmidt. They both had an interest in the history of the West. And during demobilization, when they were still serving but did not have onerous full-time duties and could take more leave, they spent time collecting copies of old photographs from the archives in the Pentagon, the Library of Congress, and the National Archives. And that research continued throughout Dee's life, and it formed the basis for many fiction and non-fiction works. I'm going to leave a link in the description box to the website for the Encyclopaedia of Arkansas because it has a more detailed biography as well as a list of all Dee Brown's published works. Question 3, how is the book structured? Well, the book is 461 pages in total, of which 395 are the main text. I wasn't sure how to talk about the structure of the text until I reached page 186, where the book talks about the most popular entertainments for new settlers to the West. And I'm quoting here, variety was to pioneer audiences the spice of theatrical life. This book caters to that pioneer preference. And so it's presenting a series of short chapters which touch on the Western experience from many angles, each one moving roughly in chronological order. You have accounts of historic battles, the trail drives, the famous outlaws, mixed together with chapters that they're more general portraiture. They're looking at aspects of frontier life like clothing, the use of music, and the development of sport and culture. There are 52 reprinted photographs in the book and 20 detailed maps. At the back, there is a chronology of notable events going from 1803 to 1929, 27 pages of bibliography, and a subject index. Question 4. Why did I choose to read this book? Okay, admittedly, I was attracted to the idea of participating in the June on the Range challenge, but not attracted to the idea of reading Western fiction. And that's because, I personally know so little about the American West. Viewers of my coffee break videos will remember how I talked about ignorance guilt. Well, ignorance guilt was bothering me, and ignorance guilt is what will drive me to pick books to read. American viewers may be dismayed to learn that when I went to school in Canada, we were taught no American history. Any American history that I learned, I picked up from American children's television programs. Okay. I've improved that situation somewhat, okay, but there are still too many gaps in my knowledge for my liking. Now, I had heard that Dee Brown was respected as a Native American historian. That is not that he was Native American, but respected in the way he dealt with the history of Native Americans. More than anything else, I wanted to read a book that didn't romanticize the settlement of the West. And I think Brown, he's a little sentimental in places, but he does achieve that. Whether you're reading about how Indigenous people coped with the arrival of settlers, or what life was like for the men and their families who braved the unknown to begin new lives in a strange piece of geography, Brown includes enough detail so there's no risk of slipping into an idyllic dream of how it was to set up a homestead or ride with a cattle drive. Question 5. How did I obtain this book, and how much did I pay? I did not pay anything. This was another library book, so 3 cheers for my local library. And this one is special because, as you can see from the inside cover, there is this lovely inscription, Campbell Burns, Christmas 2006. So this must have been a private donation to the library. That gives me a thought. I have some books that maybe the library could make some use of. We shall see. Question 6. Have I encountered anything unexpected or interesting in this work? Let's talk about what was expected. Since Dee Brown has this reputation for sympathetic presentation of Native Americans, and by sympathetic, I just mean that he presents the inevitable conflicts that would occur between advancing settlers and Indigenous peoples from the viewpoint of the latter. Brown devotes chapters to the lives of important chiefs and their tribes, and he shows how those chiefs really had no chance of making the right decision for their peoples. Whether they sided with invading settlers or tried to fight them, they always lost. Brown's account describes so many treaties signed and broken that the reader's in no doubt that treaties were meaningless. The impression that I was left was that the true desire of those who settled the West and the military units which protected them while they moved was that they would have preferred to have no Indigenous people to deal with. Instead, they gradually reduced the land Native Americans could occupy, killed the bison, on which so many of them relied for food, killed them when they fought back, women and children, as well as the fighting men. And so you were left with just demoralized survivors, which were then confined to reservations. And that was on land that they often did not know, that had diseases they had not suffered from, so they lost numbers there. And also the land was undesirable to the white settlers because you couldn't grow much on it. So there was little chance of self-sufficiency. And so the survival of the remaining Indigenous people would perpetually depend on government assistance. It was not a happy story. What was unexpected was the number of people that Brown's book leaves out. You have to wait till the final chapter of the book before you get more than just occasional mentions of women. Now, it's worth the wait for that chapter, if only for the fact, which I did not know, that the state of Wyoming extended suffrage to its female citizens in 1868. So that's got to be the earliest example of female suffrage, or it is as far as I'm aware. Now, Brown doesn't discuss exactly what this suffrage meant, so I had to do a little research. I'm going to leave a couple of links in the description box to websites that are quite helpful. The first one is GoWyld Library, which looks at that extension of suffrage in detail. It states that the greater number of women in Wyoming at that time were Native American, and so they wouldn't have had citizenship extended to them. Black women had suffrage, technically, but it was very risky for them to exercise that right. I'm going to quote here from a website called BlackPast, which had an extract from the memoirs of Supreme Court Justice John Kingman, written in 1870. This is his observation when he witnesses some African American women turning up to vote. Quote, "After a while, a carriage drove up with 4 of these colored girls in it. They were helped out, and as they went up to the polls, the crowd quietly parted. They voted and returned to the carriage without a word said. Then I breathed freely. I knew that all was safe. Well, there's a lot written between the lines there. Brown has no story to tell regarding black settlers or Chinese. They're mentioned in passing on page 169. On page 352, Brown mentions, quote, gypsy horse traders, but it's not clear whether these are Romany or Irish or some other group of people altogether. So if you are looking for information about those settlers, then you will need to look elsewhere. Question 7. Is there anything readers should be prepared for if they decide to read this book? Be prepared for something that you don't encounter in most books on history. A writing style based on sentences which rarely exceed 2 clauses. Yeah, and a vernacular vocabulary. If you have tried history books in the past and you found yourself bogged down because the academic writing just seems ponderous or confusing, then be assured Dee Brown is a completely different kind of historian. I feel I could have read this book when I was 11 years old and understood it perfectly. Question 8. Is there anything else that is interesting to know about this book, along with an interesting picture? As you will see, it does fit the next couple of questions. First of all, let's talk about law and order. Okay, I'm not sure exactly what that term meant in 19th century Western America. Law seemed to be the prerogative of the person who outsmarted or outdrew the last person who set the rules. The amount of deception and random violence and theft, all I can say is it must have added to the already considerable stresses on pioneer families, going along with weather and crop failure and accidents and just being so much more alone. This wildness, it did get tamed as the century drew to a close, just because population increased and the ability to roam and therefore escape detection and arrest was curtailed a little bit by the increased land enclosure. We'll go straight to question 9, which is any ideas for related or follow-up reading. Well, you can refer to chapter 12. Dee Brown there, he talks about the earliest writers of Westerns. Mayne Reid is one name, Edward Sylvester Ellis, Colonel Prentice Ingraham, who was the creator of Buffalo Bill. I mean, there was a man who took the name of Buffalo Bill, but he was, read the book. It'll explain everything. But I'll admit, finishing Dee Brown's book has left me with absolutely no desire to read Westerns. The whole of the 19th century in the American West, if I was to give my impression, I would say it was one long repeated demonstration of animal impulse over principle. I suppose it's helped me understand why the gun lobby in the United States can maintain its stance against firearms regulations no matter what its citizens do with their guns. I mean, the book definitely demonstrated that frame of mind, and so, that was instructive. While I was doing research for this interview, though, I also came across an interesting 2020 publication. I'm going to put the cover on screen right now. This is by Ojibwa author David Truer, and it's titled The Heartbeat of Wounded Knee, Native America from 1890 to the Present. The aim of this book is to go beyond Dee Brown's other work, which was Bury My Heart at Wounded Knee, probably his most famous title. But the conclusion of that book, obviously, it leaves Native Americans on reservations. It focuses on them as victims of the action of white settlers. And I think what David Truer wants to do with this book is move on forward in time and cultivate some greater knowledge of the efforts that Indigenous peoples have made in America at self-determination and positive action. So downloaded that to my Kindle. Right, that is our review done. Let's look at what's coming up next. If you've watched my June at 13% video, you'll know that I'm having a lot of fun with that novel right now. I will do another sideline video when I finish the book, whenever I finish the book, because I'm still pushing myself through that text. It's because the writing has a tendency to sabotage its own fictional illusion, and I go into detail about that in the sideline videos. To compensate, I'm going to treat myself to an Agatha Christie. That's my personal antidote for bad reading situations. So the next fiction review will probably be Agatha Christie's novel By the Pricking of My Thumbs. Okay, Thanks very much for checking out this video today. Hope to see you all again soon. Bye-bye.